Hi everybody, it's Manucha again from Moms and Crafters, and today I'm going to show you how to make these clay mosaic coasters. The idea is to use clay as a basis for your mosaic. You don't need any grout or anything, and it's a very kid-friendly craft that can be made for any occasion. So I did make these for Passover, but you can definitely make them for Father's Day or for any time that coasters are in order. And it's a great craft really for any age group. Teens can enjoy it, tweens can enjoy it. I am an adult, presumably, and I did enjoy it, definitely. So go ahead and get crafting. So you're going to want to start with some air dry clay. I do like the Das brand. I find it's quite moist and easy to work with, and it dries nice and firm. And prepare yourself a little jar of water or something to wet your hands with. I'm wearing gloves not because it's unsafe for the hands, just because I'm a little sensory and you do get a lot of this uncomfortable feeling residue on your hands, so gloves are totally optional for this one. It does also help you avoid fingerprints, but the water helps with that as well. So I started off just by pulling off clumps of clay in the size that I just roughly gauged was about right. Like you can see, it's about a fistful, maybe the size of a baseball, but probably smaller. And I'm wetting my hands up a little bit and just starting to smush the clay. We are doing this pinch pot style. That means that we're not rolling it out and cutting it. You can definitely do that. You might get a cleaner effect. However, I kind of designed this craft to be very doable in a classroom or group setting. And so I wanted to minimize the amount of tools that we were going to use. And I felt that a jar of water and my hands is just perfectly appropriate. So I just rolled it out into a ball, flattened it out, and then used a little bit of water to smooth it around the edges. You're going to be re-smoothing this later on, so you really do not need to get it perfect. In fact, you just want to get it basically smooth on top and in roughly the correct shape because later you're going to need to fix it anyway. You just don't want to have to overdo it. The goal of this project was to make it very doable for kids, and so I decided to pick up a more kid friendly pack of mosaic coasters in a consistent shape that, in a way, is easier to work with. So, what I started doing was plotting out my design. Now, you'll see the first few I did press right in. However, after I did a few, I realized that I'm much better off if I just plot my design first on top of the surface of the coaster, and then later on, I'm going to press it in. So, again, you have a small area to work with, so you need to go very basic with your shape and be patient and realize that the first thing you try might not work out. But again, that's why we're plotting it out first. A craft like this is very structured, but it allows for so much creativity. So I made these for Passover, and therefore I'm doing some Passover designs. My first one was a cluster of grapes, and on my next one, I'm going to make a wine goblet or a Kiddush cup. I'm also going to show you one that's more abstract because you can really do this at any time of year because it is, after all, just a coaster. Specifically for Passover, everybody in the family gets their own goblet with grape juice for kids and wine for adults who are interested in drinking wine. And traditionally, there's a coaster underneath because when we recite the 10 plagues, which were the punishments for the Egyptians, the tradition is to reduce a little bit of wine to show our mourning that people sort of had to get punished, that there was a tragedy, even if they so called deserve it, that they deserve God's wrath. It's considered a sad thing. So we sort of take away a little bit from the joy. So the tradition is to have a coaster underneath to place those drips on. So this is what we're creating, which is why I made grapes and a goblet. However, like I said, you can do any neutral design, and if you're making it for dad, you can try writing dad. It is a little bit hard to write on something so small. Now, once you're happy with your design, you're going to press the mosaic tiles deeper in so that they're fully embedded in the clay, and you're going to wet it again. On mine, I did eventually decide to add a border because it felt too simple. If you add the border, I do recommend doing it when you're finished with your design. And the border I found you can usually just press right in because you're just putting it around the edge. However, since it might need to be shifted a little bit, you may prefer not to. When all your mosaic tiles are in place, you're going to want to really get in there and press them nice and deep and go over it with water and smooth it out to a degree that you're satisfied with. Some of the coasters may become partially embedded, but I will remind you that when you're doing actual mosaics, you do tend to have some of them sunken pretty deep into the grout. So keep that in mind as you do this. And also keep in mind that it's going to be a little more secure if it's a little deeper. So you can use water to sort of rub it away from the surface if it gets a little too deep, but don't worry too much if a little bit of the clay overlaps it. Now here's a slight variation that is totally optional. However, if you're doing it for Passover, you may prefer to do it this way, and that is to create a rimmed coaster. Now, we are still doing it pinch pot style because while you can learn how to attach parts, we're focusing more on the mosaics rather than your clay crafting skills. So, if your clay crafting skills are already quite advanced and you are able to do this in parts, then go ahead and do it. Use my tutorial for the general concept of the mosaics. Create the clay creations however you'd like to. However, we're working with very, very beginners. I'm imagining that even younger elementary schools, maybe even preschoolers can do this. I'm not sure quite how young. I haven't tried it with preschoolers, so I wouldn't readily say that they can. However, I'm really intending this for younger kids. So we are doing this pinch pot style and we are slowly building up a wall. Connecting parts of clay is not so simple. It's a skill. So we're just pinching up walls and smoothing it and using generous water, not flooding it, but dipping regularly into water to smooth the clay around the edges. And again, your shape does not need to be perfect, but it should roughly be in place before you put your tiles. So, of course, ironically, on the shape that is specific to Passover needs, because it has a rim, I am going to show you a neutral design. So here we're kind of working in a manzala format, like a circular pattern. And I did play a little bit before coming up with a final design, but you'll see that it's really cute and it's just really simple and it's great for kids to learn to build different patterns. I will tell you that when doing this with younger kids, let them make it ugly. Just let them do what they want. If that's hard for you, to kind of let them loose with it and allow the results to not be so aesthetic, I would recommend limiting the color palette of the tiles rather than limiting the shapes that they do. So that way, naturally, it will come out nicer. So do this the same way, build your design, but be mindful of the rim. When you're going to be smoothing it, you're going to need to keep in mind to retain the rim. Building out a circular mandala using square tiles in such a small area is actually pretty challenging, which is why, again, I encourage you to allow younger kids to freeform. And I did need to rearrange it a few times, but again, that's the reason why it's better to place it on top before you actually go ahead with pressing it into the clay. When you're satisfied, press the tiles into the clay. Make sure, just like you did previously, it goes in somewhat evenly, that the clay sort of builds around it, and to fix anything you need to using water as you go along. I will tell you again that it's worthwhile to go in order and not to do it randomly because then, you're sort of redistributing the clay a little bit. So you can do that as you go along. And again, smooth it out with water, clean off if there's excessive clay on things, and perfect your shape at this stage. You're going to let your clay dry overnight before proceeding, and you can see I worked on a non-stick silicone surface. I peeled it off a day later, flipped it over, and let it dry on the other side. I do find that your dry clay, especially when a little bit thick, does need to be flipped and dried on the other side. You do have to be quite careful at this stage because it can crack a little bit, but you can still fix it up a little bit with water. So here's where you see that white residue. We're on many clay projects. It doesn't really matter, but on this one, because of the mosaic tiles, it makes it look a little ugly. A damp sponge is all you need, a soft sponge. Mine is from the Dollar Tree, and it's even fancier than it needed to be. Really easily, it just comes off like nothing. It comes off super easily. So go ahead and do that. You should wait until it's completely dry again before you're going to seal it. But before we do that, we are going to sand the edges gently. I just took coarse sandpaper and just that little bit that sort of smeared and spread out, that bevel kind of, I sanded off. Again, it came off really easily. But if you're doing this with very young kids, you don't need to do it. You could do it for them if you really want to, but you don't need to do it. If you want yours to come out really professional, you can go ahead and take the rotary tool and really polish up the edges. And I did not do that because I'm fed up with sand and with sort of dust in my craft room. I want to break from that. And honestly, I was making this to show you again a beginner craft, a simple craft. So I did not use the Dremel, but a little bit of sandpaper, 2 minutes, really made a big difference. One of my favorite parts of the clay crafting process is actually sealing it. I know it's funny because it's such a minor part, but it's so satisfying. So I am using dishwasher safe Mod Podge to seal this. Now, a typical mosaic project you might not seal, but because there is so much exposed clay and we actually are using it with liquids, putting liquids on it, it makes sense to seal it. I'm sealing it with dishwasher safe Mod Podge, which needs, I believe, 28 days to fully cure to dishwasher safe. In addition, if you miss a single spot, it will fall apart in your dishwasher. Ask me how I know. So take the whole dishwasher safe with a grain of salt and consider these hand washable once you've sealed this. I just do this. I use dishwasher safe Mod Podge because it is a hard finishing formula that is really, wipe down friendly, especially for things like this. Your clay coasters are complete. And look how beautiful they are. They are totally giftable. Daddy would love receiving it as a Father's Day gift. They would look great on the Passover table as opposed to many other kids' projects. They will not interfere with the beautiful decor you worked hard on, and kids can really, really have full input into the design process of these. They're smooth, they are totally functional and usable. And I love a craft that is kid friendly and is still functional and usable. So if you enjoyed making this, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit like, show me a little bit of support so I know that this is the kind of video that I should make more of. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any variations, or if you tried this and have some feedback to share.